Well, hello everyone. It's your girl Gabrielle. Welcome to a brand new episode of Hot Topics. So, let me tell you what this show is about. This show is about real talk. This show is about putting things out there that don't get put out there or we only talk about with our friends or close circles. So we like to take those things and we like to put it all out in the open. So this is a place where we uh, talk about things that are steamy. So if you're thinking, oh, we're going to talk about celebrity gossip, and no, this is not the place for celebrity gossip. This is an educational steamy. So, but we tend to focus on um, um, a, a, a narrow scope. We tend to focus on, things in public health, things in um, family, things in finance, things in education, employment. We've done some episodes on financial literacy, being a child of divorce, learning disabilities. What else have we done? We've done, did I say financial literacy already? Um, we've also done, um, hmm, I don't remember. Oh, I don't remember what other things that we've done, but we've done episodes on how to become a filmmaker. Um, and how to become an actor. Should you become an actor, right? So we talk about things that you don't really think about, or we don't really um, put out there. This is a show where we do that, and today is no different. So the topic of this episode is classroom management. So we are going to talk about for the teachers out there, for the tutors, or the parents or anyone that has to deal with a group of kids. It's definitely um, it is definitely a lot to deal with when you're dealing with more than one child. One child is a lot, but imagine two, imagine three, imagine 15, 16, 17 kids to deal with at one time. That is a handful. And today we are going to discuss some tips with you about how to do that, and even just some life experiences about how to do that. And I can't wait to have this discussion with you. So I hope you guys got your pen and paper and you are taking notes. So I have a guest with me who's going to help me out. She's actually a returning guest, and her name is Adva Hanan. And she is returning to the fire. She is returning to the hot seat, and I can't wait to tell you about her. So let's get right to it. Who is Adva Hanan? Let me remind you about who she is. So, Adva is an early childhood educator with over 7 years of experience teaching 2 and 3-year olds both inside the classroom and as a camp director. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology and early childhood education and a master's degree in education. She has specializations in special education and educational leadership. Adva also runs her own small business where she helps teachers regain their confidence in their teaching abilities by providing professional development programs. That is awesome. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to bring Adva to the stage. Hey, Adva, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Welcome back to Hot Topics.
Thank you for
Uh,
having me.
yeah. All right, so you're gonna teach us some classroom management skills, and talk about your own experience in a classroom, and I'm looking forward to it. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna
I love this topic.
all right, let's get right to it. I'm gonna pass over the baton to you.
Okay, so classroom management is hot topic at this very moment, because there are a lot of teachers who are struggling with behaviors inside the classroom that they've probably never seen before, or it was on a smaller scale. Because of COVID, a lot of the classroom dynamic has changed. A lot of the needs have changed, and so classroom management is something that many teachers are struggling with right now. Um, my first, I guess, tip for you guys in terms of classroom management is make sure that you're forming relationships with your students. I'm not saying that that's going to be the be all end all, but um, forming those relationships with your students forms a sense of trust. Forms, it helps them feel comfortable. It helps them feel okay coming to you to ask for help. It helps them feel like they are a part of the learning process. So if they have that really good relationship with you, it could end up being a very positive thing. Um, when you don't have those strong connections and relationships with your students, a lot of times that can show up in behavior, in the way they show up to school, in the way they look at school. So it could be a more negative way to look at school, when they aren't connecting to their teachers. So they can come in not really wanting to be there. They can come in unmotivated. Um, their behaviors may be bad, whatever that looks like for that specific child, and whatever that is in your definition of quote bad, whether it's unmotivated and doesn't do the work, or whether it's just behaviors like hitting or biting or whatever it is, depends on what grade you're teaching. So I'm teaching in early childhood. In early childhood, you see a lot of the hitting and the pushing and the biting, and sometimes it's warranted and other times it's for no apparent reason. And so those behaviors can show up, especially if you haven't made that connection with your students. Now, I don't think that's um, the only part to having a well managed classroom. I think another part of having a well managed classroom is knowing how you want to transition your students from one activity to the next. And I talk about this a lot because transitions are a lot of times where teachers struggle. And it's because during transitions, the expectations aren't 100% there. So you may know what your expectation is of the children, but you haven't expressed that to the children, or you haven't been on top of those expectations and making sure that those expectations are being met. Sometimes the kids don't understand that it is a transition and it might be fuzzy for them. So you need to make it more clear that there is a transition happening and that these are your expectations during that transition. Not only that, you have to figure out what your expectations are of yourself and of your colleagues in the classroom during a transition. So all of those factors, when you have a transition in a classroom, really make a difference, because if the transition doesn't go well, it means you're leading into a new subject area, a new activity with chaos that you have to now manage once again. But if you've laid out your expectations in terms of transitions and you figured out different cues to let the kids know that they are transitioning from one activity to the next, and you know exactly what you're expecting of them and of you during that time, a lot of times that can make things less chaotic, and more controlled, and therefore help you to smoothly transition into a new activity and a new um, subject area. And I guess the third thing is, I do believe that kids need consequences. I'm not saying you have to punish them, quote unquote, or anything like that, but I think that there need to be consequences to a student's actions. It can be that your students are young and they don't understand that biting and hitting is not allowed. So the consequences can be taking them away and talking to them about it before you let them back and play with their friends. Talking to them, making sure that they're apologizing to their friend. So consequence doesn't mean sitting out in timeout. It just means that their behavior, whatever they're doing, there is a response to that behavior and there is a consequence that follows. Just like in life, when we do something illegal or we were not following whatever rules we need to follow at work, there are consequences to our actions. So children, starting at a really young age, need to understand those consequences also. So I was a toddlers teacher for many years, and there were consequences in my class. Whether it was, if a kid bit, how would I respond and what would happen to go along with that? Or it was whether a kid, didn't listen to my words and did something else, and there was a consequence to that too. So I think that classroom management can be um, difficult and for many, and especially now that we are in a different time. COVID really changed the world, changed teachers and how we teach, and honestly, being home for as long as these children have been home changed the way they approach the classroom. So we have to keep all of those things in mind, plus adding in the smooth transitions and figuring out what our expectations are of those transitions and knowing how you're going to respond to unwanted behaviors, to how you're going to what kind of consequences you're going to give when a student does blank. um, I don't personally think that timeouts are effective, so I don't suggest timeouts, but I do suggest that there is some kind of consequence. So if a kid bites in your class and biting is not allowed, which it shouldn't be, you talk to the kid. What do we bite? Do we bite on our friends? Are we allowed to bite on our friends? How does that friend feel? And you talk about how, what do we bite? We bite our food, right? We bite candy, we bite whatever it is, but we don't bite our friends. And how do you think that made your friend feel? And you talk it through. Even as a parent, if your child is biting a sibling, same thing goes for that. You talk it through with your child. Don't yell at them, don't tell them no biting, don't tell them to go to their room, because their room honestly is probably more of a treat than you think, because they have toys in there, they have books in there, they're not really getting anything out of that. But if you talk to them, even if you read them a book about biting and about what biting does to your friends, all of these things can really help to navigate that behavior, and it shows them that there is a consequence. You move them away from their friends, you talk to them, you read them a book away from their friends, you have them sit down for 2 minutes, whatever it is. They know that that behavior is not acceptable. And again, the consequence, the transitions, the expectations, all of these things kind of coincide when you are running a classroom, and you want to control the classroom environment rather than have chaos ensue inside a classroom, which is super easy to get to if you aren't clear um, what you need to do to be able to get to that controlled environment, and to make sure that your classroom environment is what you've envisioned for your classroom, whether it's you want a community and you want friends to be nice to each other and you want the kids to sit nicely, whatever it is. If you don't take the time to set up a plan for your classroom management, the chaos does end up happening, unfortunately. And I've seen it happen. I used to be in camp. As I said, I have many years of camp experience, but I was a junior counselor in a camp, and the head counselor didn't really know how to manage the behaviors, and so the kids who were who were good no matter what were fine. And the others who would test boundaries would test and test and test. And it just became a chaotic environment rather than a pleasant classroom environment where, yes, the kids get to play. And yes, there are always going to be behaviors inside the classroom. Nobody's ever perfect, including us as adults. Um, but at least we knew, both the teachers and the students knew what the expectation is. And when you have that chaos, a lot of times nobody really knows what the expectation is, and nobody's really following through. So that's kind of what I have to say about classroom management. And I obviously can go into more detail about how to do that inside a classroom or how to deal with certain behaviors as a parent, if that's something interest that's interesting to you.
Hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that. And just a quick note for anyone watching this in real time, I encourage you to ask any questions that you might have. Go ahead and put it in the chat. All right. So just to be clear, when you're talking about classroom management, you're talking about elementary school kids, right?
It could be, honestly, it could be any grade. It doesn't matter if it's early childhood or elementary or even middle school. All of these tools are can be used in different ways, in age appropriate ways, to be able to manage a classroom.
All right. So with well, particularly with the biting example, so you're saying to so not necessarily like timeout or like they may I think back in my day they would put you they would just pull you and put you next to the teacher, or I think my childhood was a little bit rough in that they would take you out of the classroom and put you in a separate, more isolated room. Um, um, so you're saying those things don't really work. It's better to just talk to them and explain what they're doing.
I think that it depends on the child, because every child reacts differently to those kinds of things. So there are children who respond better to going to a separate room and sitting there for a minute or two or three or five, whatever it is, and understanding that what they did was wrong. Um, there are other children who don't respond well to that and will freak out by being put into a room by themselves. So every child is super different. Like I can tell you that I've been subbing in a pre-K class, and there are behaviors in there also, not biting necessarily, but some children don't respond well to going into an isolated room. There is one child who does. He doesn't like it, and therefore when he behaves in a certain way, he knows that if he behaves in a certain way, he'll end up going into that isolated room, and he hates it. But there are other children who they don't really respond to that. So um, there are ways to teach them that those behaviors aren't acceptable without punishing them, quote unquote, in like a timeout kind of situation.
So you're saying, one size doesn't fit all. Like, don't use the same consequence for all children.
Correct. Every child is different. Every child has their own needs, and if you set up a relationship with that child the way that in a way that forms that trust and forms that bond, it will end up helping you navigate how to deal with the quote unwanted behaviors inside the classroom when they present those behaviors to you. So this child who I talked about does really well with going into another room and then coming back to the classroom. But there are other children who wouldn't do so well with that, and there are other consequences for them. So if they're acting out, they have to sit next to the teacher for 3 minutes and we talk about it. And then when they are ready to go play, they go play. Um, there are some kids who respond to letting them sit for a few minutes and then going over to them and saying, okay, let's go take a walk. Let's talk about this. Every child is different. Every child has their own needs. And I think that's a big part of classroom management is also forming those relationships with your students to know what works for them and what really doesn't. Um, so consequences can vary depending on the child or the children's needs.
So now all this sounds like a lot of work. So how how is a teacher supposed to do all that in a classroom with 20 students, 25 students, or even even 30 students? How is a teacher supposed to do all that?
I think the first step is to get to know the children on a deeper level. So they're not just kids who are walking into your classroom, you know their names, you know them academically, but what about what's happening at home? What about who their friends are, who they hang out with? What about what they like to do, what they enjoy doing during the day? What do they do when they get out of school? Are they part of clubs? Do they go home? Do they have siblings? Are they an only child? All of those things are is you getting to know your students, and it it does take time. And as much as teachers quote don't have a lot of time, that is what you're doing when you're first stepping into the classroom, when you're first introducing yourself to your kids, and you're introducing yourself, but you also want to get to know them, so you ask them in in quiet little groups, whether that's like, so if you want to get to know your children more, like in early childhood, I used to do a family unit. I used to do a whole 2-week unit about who's in our family and if we have siblings, brothers, sisters, grandma, grandpa, whoever. And that was kind of a way for me to get to know them. But not only that, like if you have time where it's downtime and you see that one kid is sitting off to the side, go talk to the kid, see what's going on, see what's happening. Um, and I'm not saying that this doesn't take work, because it really does. And I had 19 students in my classroom and I got to know each and every one of them pretty well. And that was because it's important to me as an educator to get to know them, but it also helps you to develop that sense of trust inside your classroom, and it helps you to develop the classroom community that you're looking for. Because if you don't have those connections, your students aren't necessarily coming to you, and they're not necessarily going to tell you what's going on outside of the classroom or outside of academics. A lot of times when students are struggling, there's something else going on, whether that's they need to get evaluated or there's something going on at home that you just don't know about. And if you took the time to figure it out, you may be able to actually help them in the long run.
Right. So you're saying, despite their, you know, despite the possible the overcrowding, to you know don't look at that as a roadblock, but to challenge that, right?
Exactly.
So take a moment to see what's going on, to get to know each child, and despite there being a lot of kids, it's still possible to know every child.
Absolutely. And I think that is something that it sets the foundation inside a classroom. So if you have those relationships, and I'm not saying that building those relationships are the be all end all, but they are an important part of classroom management. And even if you have 20 kids, it is so important for you to get to know them on a more personal level, because at the end of the day, as teachers, we are we are working with the whole child. That means we are working with them academically, we're working with them emotionally, we're working with them physically. If there are any physical ailments, you have to also consider that. We're working with them and their families, and their family has a lot to do with who they are in school. So, uh, as um, overwhelming or challenging as that may sound, it is something that will pay off in the long run. And as a teacher, it'll pay off for however many years you end up being in the classroom.
So, um, does does the does the seating arrangement help with that as well? I've heard about. I mean, it's probably easier to do this when they're younger as opposed to like middle school. Um, like the way that the chairs are arranged, so not like it's better to sit in like a semicircle as opposed to like the regular
Seating.
columns and rows. Yeah. So I'm wondering if that affects the classroom dynamic as well.
Absolutely. Seating does definitely affects classroom dynamic. Whether that's I mean, because of COVID, children were sitting by themselves up until recently. So it was literally one table 3 feet away from all the other tables, or 6 feet, depending on what the regulations were in each state. Um, but yeah, it is shown that um, seating does help, because if let's say that one kid is struggling academically, but this child doesn't do well with another child sitting next to them because all they're going to do is talk or be silly or not pay attention or whatever it is, you can switch those seats for them to be around children who will push them to do their best, who will push them to do the work, to take part in the learning. um, I used to, I did this for early childhood. I had seats on my carpet. I used to make um, a small poster with their name and their picture on it and stick it on my rug and tell them that that was where they were sitting. And it would help a lot. And I would change things up all the time, because there were, at the beginning of the school year, it was very different than come December, January time. And then come March, it was also, again, very different. So every time I would change it around so that children who were being silly with others would be split, but then would be also put with children who would motivate them, who would help them to want to be a part of whatever the lesson may be. There's a lot more to just the seating, but I know that in elementary school, there are groupings. They do a group of 4. And that gives them kind of, when they're doing work that is in a group work, they can just do work with that group. And it gives them the opportunity to collaborate and talk to each other and get to know each other. Again, you're forming friendships in the classroom. If 2 students haven't been together in a classroom before and they sit together, they end up forming that friendship. So yeah, seating can definitely help a lot. But it also all depends on what age group you're dealing with and what the regulations are now that COVID's around.
So speaking of COVID, so how does it work in terms of the Zoom classrooms? I don't know if you have done a classroom on Zoom, but how does that work in terms of classroom management?
So with Zoom, it's a little bit more challenging. You have to figure out what you want out of that Zoom call. And a lot of times, the best way to get your children involved is by having them do individual work while you're on the Zoom call, or break out into breakout rooms and have them work with the children that are in their breakout room. So those are all like different ways to kind of engage your students, but also like make sure that they're on the Zoom, make sure that they know what's going on, make sure that they're interacting with their friends, not only, during a lunch Zoom per se, but also while you're teaching. So you teach them something, you engage with them, and then you split them into breakout rooms and you have them work on a worksheet that you sent them the night before. Um, or if you're in early childhood, play a game on Zoom with them. Like have them do a guessing game, do any kind of game could be really fun. Or again, another early childhood piece you can do is email the parents the night before about an art project that you want them to do and what they should be prepared to have. And while they're doing that art project, talk through what you're trying to teach them. Um, Breakout rooms don't really work for younger than like kindergarten, first grade. So in early childhood, it's all about like doing fun activities with them on Zoom. In the grades, you can do those fun activities also, but you can also, split them into breakout rooms and have them collaborate with one another. Or you can find time to sit with each student individually and, talk to them about what they're enjoying and what they're not enjoying and what they're struggling with, and maybe teach something little to them during that time. This is all building relationships, even on Zoom, even while you're digital. Honestly, at this point, I don't think there are many students who are learning virtually anymore, because COVID regulations have kind of died down. Um, Even I mean, the schools around here don't even do that when you're sick anymore. The only thing that has changed is snow days have become virtual days, which is unfortunate because I truly believe the kids should be outside playing in the snow and not being on their computer all day. Um, but most children nowadays are in the classroom, as long as they're healthy and okay to come in.
Okay. All right. All right. So I want to make time for this. So you created a classroom management quiz,
It's a
uh,
classroom leadership quiz. So
classroom leadership quiz. Okay.
yeah, which all goes down it comes down to also the classroom management, because when you're a teacher, you're leading your classroom, you are showing your students what's acceptable, uh what's the word I'm looking for? Acceptable, but I don't like that word. What's appropriate inside the classroom and what's not appropriate. Um, so the quiz is basically 4 research-based leadership styles that are um, really geared towards education and towards teaching, and it basically gives you different questions that you can answer, and all those questions lead to a certain leadership style. And it covers classroom management, it covers communication in the classroom, it covers reflection, etc.
Okay. So I wanted to take a moment and do this quiz. I want to see what kind of classroom leader I am. And I'm going to, for the viewers, I'm going to put the link to the quiz at the bottom of the screen so you can access the quiz for yourself. All right, so let's do this. All right, so what kind of leader am I in the classroom? All right, you could see the screen okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's do this. Okay, what is your expectation of yourself and your students? I have high expectations for both myself and my students. I expect myself to continue working hard and have a vision of what I'm going to achieve. I expect my students to always do their best, whatever that might mean for them. I have high expectations for my students, but not necessarily for myself. I want to see my students succeed, so I do what I can to meet the needs on a daily basis. I don't have expectations, I just go with the flow. I have expectations, but I don't necessarily stick to all those expectations as the school year goes by. Hmm. So I guess if I think about this and the students that I tutor, um, Hmm. Let me see. I mean, my expectations are high, but sometimes it's it does ebb and flow, I will say that. But I do expect my students to achieve high. Um, hmm. All right, so I see that you talk about the teacher and the student. High expectations for my students, but not necessarily for myself. I got to think about this. I want to see my students succeed, so I do. Okay. I want to see my students succeed, so I do what I can to meet their needs on a daily basis. Huh. This is tricky. I have expectations, but I don't necessarily stick to all those expectations as the year goes by. Huh. Okay, I gotta think about this one. So I do what I can to meet their needs on a daily basis. I guess I'll go with the first one.
Okay.
I gotta think about that one. All right. This one. I only use, oh, which style of communication do you use with your students' families and how often? I only use email as my form of communication with families. I email once a month with a big update for the parents and a few pictures as well. I communicate in other ways when absolutely necessary. I use most modes of communication. Hmm. I use email as a way for parents to ask any questions, email any concerns. All right, well, I love email. I personally prefer email to like phone.
I hear that.
So let's see. I only use email as my form of communication with families. I email once a month with a big update for the parents and a few pictures as well. I communicate in other ways when absolutely necessary. I use most modes of communication as I like to make sure the parents are well informed and know what's going on inside the classroom. I use emails for daily communication, phone calls for anyone who requests, and those who I feel it's important to communicate with over the phone. And I send weekly newsletters. I am always in communication with parents, no matter what's going on inside the classroom. I use email as a way for parents to ask any questions, address any concerns, and give me any updates. I do communicate via phone every so often, but it only happens when something critical comes up. I don't really use any specific mode of communication, but the parents know that I am available to speak at any time. Um, I'm more of the third one. Okay.
Okay.
Do you set boundaries and are you able to stick to them? Mm. I do set boundaries, but I have a hard time sticking to those boundaries, especially in teaching. I have firm boundaries in everything I do, personal and teaching. I like my routines and don't want anything taking me away from my time. I love to set boundaries, but I am not always the best at sticking to them. If they're really important to me, then I will stick to it. Otherwise, it usually goes out the window. I do set boundaries, but I have a hard time sticking. Eh, well, not the second one. Let's see. I love to set boundaries, but I'm not always the best if they're really important. Yeah, I'm the third one. All right. How would you describe your classroom management style? I believe in setting the rules and routine from the start. That means the students learn what's expected and it continues to be reinforced throughout the entire school. I prepare for the negative behaviors that might come up and prepare a plan for each year. I'm more on the relaxed side of things. There are some rules that are reinforced and others that aren't. There isn't really a set routine except specials and lunch and recess. It's a bit more chaotic in my classroom than a type A personality might like, but it suits me. What's classroom management? It's chaos in my classroom on a consistent basis, and I don't know what to do. My students act terribly, they don't listen, they hit one another, and I complain anytime I make them do anything. Hmm. Hmm. I think I'm more on the second one. Do you hold a vision for what you want your classroom to look and feel like and discuss that vision with your students and colleagues? Absolutely. This is something I discuss with my students every single day. It is a great way to remind my students of the expectations and rules inside the classroom. I'm not so clear on my vision, but I know that I want to develop a vision for my classroom and share it with others. I have a very clear vision for what I want my classroom to look and feel like, but I'm not confident in it, so I don't really discuss it. I don't hold a vision for my classroom and definitely don't discuss it with others. Um, hmm. Hmm. I don't. I just like have some. Hmm. I think I'm more leaning more towards the third one, to be honest. Okay. Do you feel confident when you step into your classroom each morning? Yes, I love my job and I absolutely love seeing my students grow and learn as the year progresses. Most of the time, I do get bogged down when lessons don't go as planned and I have to revise my plans on the spot. No, but I'm really good at pretending and faking it while I'm teaching. Never felt confident and have always questioned my teaching ability. Hmm. Yeah, maybe the second one. How do you approach difficult situations where you know that it won't necessarily make everyone happy, but it will be the right thing to do in the end? I hate having to make difficult decisions. I'm a huge people pleaser and would rather know that everyone likes me and appreciates what I do. I make tough decisions on a daily basis, but it causes me severe anxiety, so sometimes I don't follow through. I make the tough calls because I know that at the end of the day, it's the right call for my students and my classroom. If someone doesn't like it, I'm always happy to discuss it, but won't necessarily change my mind. Yeah, I have severe anxiety, so I'm in the I'm in the second one. And do you feel that you know the steps to helping your students continue to grow and learn inside your classroom? Yes, I'm confident in the fact that my kids not only are learning, but are supported and getting the services they need in order to succeed. I'm pretty good at knowing how to help my students when they need that extra support or guidance, but I get frustrated when my way isn't helping them learn the material. I'm a bit lost when it comes to helping students who need support. I need support and don't always get it while at work. Hmm. Do you feel that you know the steps to helping your students continue to grow? Um, hmm, hmm, hmm. I'm in the second one, to be honest. All right, okay, and I, I am a self-aware leader. Okay, what does that mean? You are unapologetically confident in yourself and your skills inside the classroom. You know who you are as a teacher and as a mother, spouse, sister, friend, etc. You know how to set boundaries and stick to them so that you have that work life balance and don't come too close to burning out. You love to set aside time to reflect on your day and on your classroom. Being self aware is not the absence of mistakes, but the ability to learn and correct them. Okay. All right. And you have some tips here. Ready to continue learning? Read on, friend. Okay. So find a teacher community. A teacher community can do a person wonders if they find the right cohort of teachers. Having a teacher community can give you a group of people who understand what you do and how hard the work really is. It can give you a community to lean on for support. As teachers, we can't do it alone. Teaching is hard and it can feel really lonely when you don't have anyone to turn to. Not only that, it gives you a chance to collaborate with other working in the same grade or subject area. Collaboration can open you up to different ways of teaching, different ways to engage your students, and so much more. Invest in your learning. Learning alongside your students is something that is strongly emphasized when studying education. You are not only the teacher, you're also the learner. You can learn from your students, you can learn from the teachers around you, you can learn from a mentor. Okay, here you talk about yourself. Just gonna speed right through this here. And then looking for a little extra guidance, sign up for what it takes to be a classroom guru webinar, and then you have your webinar here at the end. Okay, so this was an interesting quiz. Um, so tell us, well, yeah, tell us about that. Well, in seeing that, what in seeing, well, I'll ask you this. So in seeing the answers that I chose, what things came to your mind?
Well, I love that you took the time to really consider what what worked best for you or what you were like inside the classroom. Because I think when it comes to quizzes, a lot of times we just want to get to the answer. Um, and it can take, like I said when we first spoke, it can take 3 minutes to get through it if you want it to, but it can also take you a longer time to really like sit down with yourself and be honest with yourself about how you are inside the classroom. And I think each leadership style kind of emphasizes what you do really well, and then from there I give tips so that you can like take that and move forward with it. Whether that's journaling. Some of the time I talk about journaling. With others I talk about that teacher community that is so important. And I know a lot of teachers who are like, I'm not here to make friends when I'm at work. But in reality, um, if you're not connecting with other teachers and other people who are in the same industry, it can be really lonely and really hard. So I really created this so that people can take their leadership styles and run with it and maybe implement some things that they feel might not be going 100%. Um, and these are styles, leadership styles that I actually researched and um, really took the time to learn about so that I could give anybody who takes the quiz not only the information about the leadership style itself, but also give you guys like tips and tricks to like help you move forward and help you become the classroom leader that you want to be, and maybe possibly take part in a classroom community, as you saw was a tip and a suggestion. And that doesn't mean that you have to pay for anything. It just means making those connections at work, or making those connections via a Facebook group, or anything that could help you make connections with people who understand where you're at right now in this very moment, teaching inside a classroom during COVID, etc.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right. So let's start to wind down. So, do you have any final words of advice that you would like to share?
When it comes to classroom management, don't give up so quickly. It doesn't take a day to get things managed inside a classroom. It takes a few weeks. So even if you're starting from scratch right now because things have gotten chaotic, just remember that it takes consistency and it takes time. So if you are introducing a new way to transition, do not expect your students to be able to transition beautifully a day later. Um, Consistency is key, and not giving up is also part of it. And I know how hard that can be. You just want to throw that transition out because you're like, it's not working. But if you give it enough time, it will work.
All right, fabulous. Thank you so much, Adva. And let's put up your banner. All right, you guys. So Adva Hanan is on social media, right? So if you want to reach out to her, you want some classroom advice, you need some tips, you need some a one-on-one consultation, definitely reach out to her. She is on Instagram and LinkedIn. And if you want to reach out to her directly, you can email her. So all of her information is scrolling below at the bottom of your screen. I encourage you to reach out to her with any questions that you may have. If you're seeking that consultation, definitely reach out to her. And I also encourage you to follow her on Instagram. So that's it. She only just has Instagram. So I encourage you to go to her Instagram account right now and follow her. And you also have a webinar coming up, which we spoke about before. Can you talk about your webinar?
Sure. It is a precursor to opening my course back up after it was opened in January. So it'll basically take you through the steps to being a better classroom leader, a more aware classroom leader, etc. It's called What It Takes to Be a Classroom Leader. So I take you through 3 specific steps. And at the end of it, you will also get a little bit about my course, which is going to be opening up as well. It's called Become Your Own Classroom Guru. So the webinar is going to take place April 4th at 8 p.m. And if you take the quiz, there is a place for you to sign up, and that is you're signing up before the public actually gets access to it. So if you are interested in saving your spot now, you definitely can just take the quiz, get your results, read through them, and you can sign up through the link in the at the end of the results.
Absolutely. And the quiz you are referring to, I'm just going to put that link back up again. So the quiz that I just took, you can take it yourself. The web link is scrolling below at the bottom of your screen. And for those of you watching this on Facebook, it will also be provided to you in the description. All right, so I encourage you to take the quiz for yourself and actually take the time and go through the quiz.
Absolutely.
All right, Adva, thank you so much for joining me again on Hot Topics.
Thank you for having me again.
All right, so I'll place you backstage now, and it is just you and me, guys. So let me put up my banner. Okie dokie. All right, and we have reached the conclusion of our episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, whatever platform that you are watching this episode right now, please, which is on social media, please check out our social media for more videos and clips. And don't forget to follow us. And while you're at it, please let us know what you thought about this episode by leaving a comment in the comment section below or in the comment thread. And as a reminder, this web series is a production of A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. So if you would like to learn more about the company, the things we have to offer, our services, workshops, if you're looking for a tutor for yourself or for your child, please reach out to us. Our contact info is scrolling below at the bottom of your screen. However, I will say our website, it is www.astepaheadtutoringservices.com. And I also encourage you to sign up for our email list and our texting list. You will receive exclusive promotions, discounts, and offers when you sign up for the texting list and email list. You will receive those things before anybody else. So I encourage you to sign up for those things. The links to those lists are scrolling below at the bottom of your screen as well. And again, for those of you watching this on YouTube, it will also be provided in the description. All right, so I'm just going to get this last message before we close for the episode.
Hey there, have you heard of us? We're a small team of tutors here at A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. We believe that education and information should be accessible to everyone, regardless of income, race, or creed. We're dedicated to making this happen, but we need your help. Please consider making a donation to our company. No amount is too small. Your donation will allow us tutors to remain employed, offer free and low-cost services, put on productions like this web series, and reach out to families nationwide. With your help, we can tackle the academic challenges of our students and the emotional, mental, and behavioral changes that result from these challenges. As a bonus, we can improve our communities in the process. Support us today. Note: we're a for-profit company. We're not a charity. Your donation may not be tax deductible. Please consult a tax professional.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining us at this episode. I look forward to seeing you at the next episode. Now, I am signing off. Whoops, wrong video. All right, this is the right one. Signing off.